This is put on by Bart Skalla. He's our CFO, and he's also a co-founder, not a counterfeiter, co-founder here at RevRoad. He works in our capital and our finance services, also helps out with strategy. He started out in corporate finance. He worked in venture capital as well. He worked as an economist for Texas Instruments, and he helped create an in-house venture fund for that corporation. He lives in Ridgway, Colorado, with his wife and 4 kids. Most of them have flown the coop, and the ones that haven't, he's trying to chase out. He lives to play with his 2 young grandsons, Kai and Avery, and he also hopes that his beautiful, understanding, and amazing wife will let him get a Mastiff one of these days. So Bart, come on up and regale us with accounting, and finance.
Thank you, Jason. And Natalie, if you're watching at home, how could you say no to letting me get a Mastiff after that warm introduction by Jason? So, numbers, accounting, finance, what would you rather talk about on a warm August day, right? Before we dive into that, though, I would propose that one number is 50. And we have a RevRoad person, in fact, the RevRoad person, who just turned 50. Darren, would you come up here and join me on the stage for a minute? He might need help. So we got him a cane, and he'll need it from now on, now that he's joined the Over the Hill gang. And I'm still the senior citizen at RevRoad, but Darren, nice to have you join the club.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Use the cane. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay, so hopefully in 20 minutes or so, you will be convinced that they're not just numbers within finance and accounting, and instead of just numbers, we hope that you will trust the numbers, and that your numbers are moving up and to the right, like we like to see them in any great company, any great startup. Numbers can seem arbitrary at times, like this one. Anybody ever seen this number, 1.618034? Yeah? Okay. So, believe it or not, this number is everywhere in our lives. It's in our very fingerprints. It's in our art and our bodies and the ecosystem, the environment around us. I have a tape measure here, and if I were to measure, and does anybody have a phone with a calculator on it? One of those new phones that has the calculators? Also one that takes pictures now. I understand they can take snapshots. If I were to measure, so from my fingertip to the middle of my elbow, about 20 inches, and then on up to my shoulder, call it 32 inches. What's 32 divided by 20? Somebody say it here? 1.6, yeah. And a more precise measurement just might get us to 1.618034. If I were to take the length of my middle finger compared to the ratio of my hand, you would find the ratio to be 1.618034. If I were to take my height, I used to be 6'4", but I'm so old I'm shrinking now, and take that by my belly button down, that ratio, not just on me, but on each of you, would be 1.618034. So, kind of interesting. The length of my head by the width of my head, 1.618034. Ears, eyes, everything is 1.618034. So, it's also in the universe, in creation, in solar systems, in galaxies. It's in our weather patterns, in hurricanes, in tornadoes, in the curvature of those. It's in the shape of continents. It's in our DNA. That number, 1.618034. If you ever want to hack into my computer, it may or may not be unlocked with 1.618034. So this is known as the Fibonacci sequence, or the golden ratio, the divine mean, the divine ratio, the golden mean. Not suggesting that there is divine origins in this, but I'm not suggesting there's not. So leave that for you to decide. It's in our sports, our games, our culture, everything that we do. It's in our architecture, our buildings. It's in our economics, our stock market, our charts. You can find patterns in this in pretty much everything. Our companies create logos. It's in our books, our business cards. It's in your devices. Just another ratio here. 8 divided by 5. Anybody with a calculator? 1.61803. How did you know? So, yeah, I find that just so interesting. Again, the Fibonacci sequence, named for an Italian named Fibonacci, in about 1213, 1400, somewhere in there during the Renaissance, comes up with this. And this is basically what it is. You start with 0, you add 1, and you get 1. Then you add the last number, 1, to it, and you get 2. And you keep adding these numbers in sequence. And if you were to take 89 divided by 55, guess what you would get? 1.618034. What's the next number after 89? Anybody with or without your calculator? What would the next number be in this sequence? 144, yeah. And if you take 144 divided by 89, you would get 1.618034. So that's the sequence, and it continues. And after about the 11th number, you get exactly that number. In the earlier numbers, it doesn't come out to quite that precise, but it starts honing in on that. And so just something that I find so interesting. And so I share that with you in hopes that you as entrepreneurs, in creating your businesses, in doing your books, in tracking your trends, and figuring out your numbers, hopefully you can trust those numbers so that your teams can trust those numbers, so that your investors can trust those numbers, so that your customers, your suppliers, everyone that you work with can trust these numbers. There is meaning and magic in numbers. I like to think of numbers in terms of number lines. It puts it in context, in relation to other numbers, right? So here's a number line, and it's combined. So the x-axis is the number line, and that's years, the last couple thousand years. And the y-axis, and you can add dimension to numbers and number lines. And so that's measuring total GDP, or gross domestic product, over the last couple thousand years. And you'll see for the vast majority of that time period, it was flat. If we were to hone in on just a much smaller subsection of years, there would be variation in it, certainly, to account for war or an unusual time of trade and innovation in the year 500 or something like that. But compared to the vast wealth and productivity and innovation that's taken place in the last couple of hundred years, it flattens that curve. And so something happened that caused that curve to skyrocket upward. Now you can adjust for population. So this is GDP in 1990 dollars. So a while back, and it only goes up to the year 2000. And now that number would be over 10,000. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's every man, woman, and child, basically a wealth approximation. How much do we produce? How much do we have? What's the GDP per person? So similar number. Something happened, and numbers can help us understand what happened. So here's a little bit longer x-axis, going back to the year 10,000 BC, and you can start to see a little bit more variation. starting a couple of thousand years ago, and then that same growth curve just accelerates. And I find charts like this, and whether you're measuring on the y-axis population or wealth or GDP or innovation, you're going to find that same curve in the numbers. So diving into, and this is basically recorded history. So for thousands of years, our economies were based on just local trade and kind of tribes within, and maybe the neighboring tribe we would trade with, but hunting, farming, gathering, nothing much happened in terms of a store of wealth or a creation of capital that would lead to a magnification of capital to be able to rise above subsistence farming. And the numbers were fingers, right? And so there's a base 20 numbering system because we have 20 digits on our body. And then we started using sticks and rocks and marks, and we see evidence of that still in caves in France and Africa and Australia and other places. And so there's a record of numbers, and that's kind of getting back to the origin. And some say that numbers themselves, the need for humans to communicate in numbers actually preceded language, and it led to the development of language. So that's one theory. More recently, over the last couple thousand years, trade expanded beyond just local tribes, and there were regional powers, like the Greco-Roman empires, and these were based on trade and sea routes and highways that they would create, which would allow for greater trade. And their number system was more symbols, and we're all familiar with some of those symbols. The Mayans had a numbering system that's not hard to figure out, somewhat similar to a Roman type of symbol. In this time period, a couple thousand years ago, a guy came along and proffered an equation, and he said that if you would do this, if you would fulfill the equation, do this number of times, you're more apt to have a successful life or a good life, a just and a merciful life. And so here's the equation. I have 100 grand bar, if you can decipher this and tell me the answer. What's the answer to this? LXX times VII. Anybody? Yes. How did you get 490? Yeah, L is 50, X's are 10, and of course a V is 5, and the way the Romans came up with that, they think, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and your hand kind of makes a V, and then two V's would be the X or the 10. So now can you tell me what it looks like in Roman numerals, the answer? Okay, so it'd be this. So difficult and cumbersome, and the guy that suggested this equation, Jesus of Nazareth, did not mean for the calculation to be worked out. He wasn't saying forgive each other 490 times. His followers said 7 times, and he said no, 7 times 70. 7 was their complete number, their whole number, their perfect number. And he was saying, go even beyond that. And so he was really suggesting it's an infinite number of times to do that. So we go on, and in about this time period where that white bar is 500 AD to 900 AD, somewhere in there, something happened that begins to allow for that inflection point in the graph. And they think it started in India. And then the Arabs adopted it, and for a while the Arabic world was the main power of the world, and it's because of what happened here relative to numbers. Hindu numbers from India that the Arabs adopted and used and then brought into Europe. And those numbers look like this, and they should look a little bit familiar. And the reason they came up with these shapes is because of the number of angles in each number. So the 2 looks like a Z, and there's obviously 2 angles there. The 9, we don't write usually with all those curves or angles or lines, but there are 9 angles there. And so with the use of that first one, the number 0, which was actually outlawed by the Catholic Church at one time, tremendous leaps forward in technology, and I would argue trust can now take place. So just a little more history here. This is a guy named Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Has anybody ever heard of al-Khwarizmi? Tyler has? How would you Latinize his name? Algorithmi. What do you think is named after him? Algorithm, yeah. So a sequencing, a step-by-step process of mathematics or now programming, right? So he was this famous mathematician that took the Hindu numbers and the concept of 0 and wrote extensively about it and was just a revolutionary to the point that he was thought of as a magi, a wise man, a magician even. So I figured since Caesar shared that great magic trick, I'm going to share a magic trick as well. Sorry. Okay, so for this trick, and I'll give it away. Magicians aren't supposed to tell their secrets, but it's just math. So I need a volunteer. Super simple. You get a dark chocolate almond mint kind bar, if you'll be kind enough to assist me. Somebody, the board? Okay. Somebody that I don't know. If you and I have never met, raise your hand. All I need you to do is go to that bookshelf. In fact, how about somebody here? Yes, you, ma'am. Have we ever met? I don't believe so. What's your name? Liz. Okay. Well, you pick any book from that bookshelf and bring it up to me. One that looks like it has over 100 pages. Great. Thank you. Here's your kind bar. So, and Liz, I'm going to give this book back to you. I am looking, not sure what all this stuff is. I am looking in this book for something that you and I can agree on through mathematics is what al-Khwarizmi here would help us find. So let me just, there are certain words that resonate in mathematics, and they just seem to connect in terms of the soul. Okay, so hold on to this book. You can sit down. And then I need a little more audience participation. Through a 4-digit number, we're going to agree on the word. And we'll derive that number with 3 digits. So somebody here, then somebody in the middle, and somebody over here, shout out a number between 1 and 9. The first number and the third number can't be the same. Give me a number. 7? 4? 1? Okay. And we'll reverse them. 1, 4, 7. Help me with the math. 11 minus 7 is 4. We borrowed 1 here. 13 from 4 is 9. We borrowed 1 here. 6 from 1 is 5. Is my math right? Okay. Then we'll reverse them again. Can't read my writing. Is that a 4? Okay, so 4, 9, 5, and then we'll add them. 9, 8, carry the 1, 1, 0. So there's our random 4-digit number. And now I know the word. I'm going to write it back here. Okay, Liz, will you turn to page 108 and look up the 9th word from the top? Page 108, and then start at the top and count 9 words over. Okay, what's the word? Cut. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. That sounds a little better. Here's what I wrote. So, I'll tell you the trick there. The book is just a diversion. No matter what 3 digits you take, as long as first and third are not the same, you reverse them, subtract them, get the answer, reverse that, add them, you will always get 1,089. It just has to do with placement of a 10-base number system and kind of the symmetry of numbers. So you can do that one on your kids at home. Okay, so you're wondering, what is the point? How does this relate to entrepreneurship? One more thing here. There drops in a little white bar there in about the year 1500. Something very important here happened, and it's not Columbus discovering America, because he didn't discover America. It's this Italian guy, Luca Bartolomeo de Pacioli. Isn't that a fun name to say? So, and if you notice the years there, 1447 to 1517, he lived 70 years. How long did Alcarazzi live? 70 years. I also had his birth dates, birth and death dates noted. And so we know from numbers that people lived 60, 70, 80 years. So Darren, you have a few more years to go. They didn't have lifespans of 35 or 40 years. That was the average lifespan, but it was because there was such a high incidence of child mortality. So, Pacioli, he's a monk, he's a merchant, he was a magician and a mathematician, he was a teacher and scholar. He has quite a resume. He's a good friend of Leonardo da Vinci in Venice. He's the father of double entry accounting. And so, taking the work of Alcarazzi and Fibonacci, he didn't invent double entry accounting, but he wrote about it. And because of his writings, we know of it, and we use it pretty much verbatim still today, 500 years later. And it's that allows us to trust numbers, to trust accounting and finance numbers. And it's that trust that, without that trust, you have to be royalty to be able to afford scribes to keep all of your books and your accounts. And with it, you can suddenly do business with strangers, with foreigners. You don't have to speak the same language because math is the same language. And double entry accounting allows for some pretty amazing things. So here's a quick example. You're a merchant and you sell the cook for the king's court 30 ears of corn at 10 shekels per ear. So the entry is simply this. You debit cash for 300 shekels, and you credit corn. And so before double entry accounting, the scribes are simply writing in a journal, the books, that you have 300 more shekels. And there may be a notation, it's because we sold some corn. But it was hard to check and cross-check, and nothing balanced, and it was just hard to make decisions based on that. So a debit, which is just the left side of the ledger, and the word debit in Latin is he owes. And so you have a debit card and you think that's a good thing, but from the bank's perspective, it's a debit, and it's something that they owe. So the corn is credited, that decreases your stock of corn, and the king's cook can enter something similar. It's just reversed. And so this simple, it looks so simple, but it creates a revolution, and you can create ledgers, and it unleashes a tidal wave that looks like this. Now, granted, there's other technology, the Renaissance, the awakening, the industrial revolution, innovation, all these things are coming about, but none of it could happen without double entry accounting. And instead of being entrepreneurs, you might be farmers right now, which Chris may like, but for the rest of us, we would not be blessed. And it's not just to have that spike up and to the right representing growth and wealth. It's the improvement of the human condition. And I'm going to share a quote later by John Adams that will sum that up. But for now, it's just important, I thought, to understand kind of the history of numbers and how we as entrepreneurs can trust our numbers. So the industrial age happens and the global economy ramps up, and our accounting is done through numbers. Base 10 for the most part, and then base 2 more recently. What are the 2 digits, Tyler? Yeah, so binary, which takes us to a whole nother level. Here's a short video that explains kind of what would happen without double entry accounting. It's an analogy. So without double entry accounting, we can't communicate, even with strangers. This Good Samaritan was trying to stop the truck from rolling down the hill. Maybe those other guys are Good Samaritans. They're trying to help this poor guy jumpstart his truck. If they had double entry accounting, they can talk to each other. They can trust each other. So just in summary here, numbers are necessary, even beautiful. They allow for patterns and predictability. You can have a hypothesis and test the numbers and see what happens. And if it works, great, you move forward. If it doesn't, you pivot and try something else. The symmetry and balance of numbers, the magic even. And so counting matters. And I know I'm a little bit self-serving. I'm actually not an accountant, but I try to act like one sometimes. And so at RevRoad, we don't want to do your books for you. We can help you get them set up, but you should do your own books. You should understand your own numbers, and you should experience firsthand the thrill, not just when you close with a signature for signing a new contract or a new sales deal, but the thrill of charting that out and seeing your numbers move up and to the right, whether it's revenue or EBITDA or something else. So double entry accounting lets us trust each other. That trust, in turn, allows for growth. And that's kind of, growth is the next function beyond, finance is the function beyond accounting that allows for rapid growth. And again, not just growth for the sake of growth and wealth for the sake of wealth. I think I have that. It doesn't come up, but let me read you the quote from John Adams, if I can find it. I don't seem to be. Well, it's a great quote. He basically says that John Adams, the revolutionary, studies war and politics so that his kids can study math and engineering and science, so that their kids can study architecture and the Fibonacci sequence and art and music, and you get kind of the progression, the evolution of the human condition. And so this graphic just kind of demonstrates the interplay between bookkeeping, the numbers, the transactions, and accounting, which is just summarizing those numbers and reporting on them, finding trends, and then finance, which is basically being able to make decisions on them and pouring on the gas, so to speak. But it's all possible because of this new number system that we have the Hindus in India to thank for, and the Al-Kharazmi, for whom algorithm is named. And we sometimes just call it the Arabic number system, but it's actually Hindu Arabic. And so they deserve the credit. And they deserve a lot of the credit for this up and to the right chart, where we have a better lifestyle. We don't all have to be farmers just trying to feed ourselves every day. We can study other things, and we can have ideas as entrepreneurs and try them out, have a hypothesis and test it, see if we can predict what will happen. That's what we're trying to do as entrepreneurs, right, is predict the future. So we have these people to thank. And so they're not just numbers, we can trust the numbers. And that's all I have. Thank you.